This year we come together under a powerful theme, empowering finance for a better world powered by AI. At its core, this theme reflects how artificial intelligence, when combined with human insight, can truly shape the future of finance. With that being said, it's truly an honor that for the first session for today, we have a fireside chat wherein we look at highlighting on the topic, reimagining customer experience in the era of AI, bridging strategy, scale, and seamless journeys. Allow me an opportunity to now invite our eminent speakers on stage. Let's give it up for Ravi Santhanam, Group Head and CMO of HDFC Bank. Let's give him a warm, warm round of applause as we welcome him on stage. In conversation with our speaker, Jose Thomas, Vice President, Financial Services, Adobe in North America. Well, as we have our dignitaries on stage once again, let's give them a mighty round of applause and let's kickstart, ladies and gentlemen, day 2 of Global Fintech Fest 2025. Over to you, Ravi, to take it forward.
Good morning, everybody. I know you all have braved traffic and have come here on time. Thank you so much for that. I have with me Jose Thomas, Vice President at Adobe. Jose has been an inspiring leader for the last 20 years across multiple organizations, across multiple geographies. He has been heading Microsoft operations in Asia Pacific as well as in Korea, if I remember right. And he has been pioneering customer experience change and digital transformation change at financial institutions across India. Welcome to India, Jose.
Thank you, Ravi. Can I say something very quickly? Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. I don't get to visit India often, even though I am Indian origin. The last time I was here was about a few months back in Bangalore. And I stayed at this nice hotel, and I think they were really trying to be very hospitable. And I went down for some great Indian food. And they bought me the finest pasta you can find anywhere. So I think they were really, they figured with my accent, that's probably what I want. But to get some samosa and some chole, they had to go outside. So anyway, this time around, I'm looking for more of a local experience.
Okay. I'm sure we will ensure that happens after this. And first thing, we are at GFF, and GFF has been a pioneer in terms of bringing a lot of conversations on multiple areas which impacts the entire financial industry in India. And Fintech has necessarily helped almost all the traditional banks like us, for example, to move multiple threshold levels in terms of customer experience. And they had informed, they had made sure that they see a problem, consumer problem, and they solved it in a frictionless way, which was the reason for the banks in reality to start really pushing itself on the technology and improve customer experience. In your experience across the world, where do you see in, say, for example, in the developed nations, what's happening on customer experience and how are the financial institutions navigating this? Who are the real winners and who are the laggards?
Yeah, it's a great question. So a couple of things. When we say fintech, it can be, everyone from PayPal to a Stripe to all the names that you've called out here, but it's also companies like Apple, right? Because you think about the experience of being able to do payment transfers, everything, Samsung Pay, Apple Pay, whatever, and what I would say is the consumer experience is what really drove the expectation for the banks to have to change. You think about the Amazon experience, right? You go online, you click on a few items that you need within a day or two, or sometimes even in hours, it's there. So the customer base in the U.S., in Australia, in the U.K., what I see is there's a demand that digital is the first experience to engage with. Walking into a physical bank, as much as some folks from my generation are used to that. That's just not the standard now, right? So I think the expectation is, look, if whatever I need, whether it's being able to log in and quickly check a balance, make a transfer, be able to even shift a couple of things around in my portfolio for investments. The expectation is you're digital first, and if you're not, you'll be left behind, right? You will lose customer base. As far as who's the leaders, I'll tell you, a couple of the big banks in the U.S. that I regularly work with is J.P. Morgan Chase. They have done a phenomenal job, I would say, in a digital first experience, both on mobile and web. Jamie Dimon has, for the longest time, CEO of J.P. Morgan, has said the fintech explosion has to be a wake-up for the traditional banks because they are providing the experience that is going to be the measuring stick now for all the banks going forward. And so I would say they've done a really, really good job. When it comes to credit cards, I think Citi and Wells Fargo have done an amazing job, right? So it really depends on what the origins are. Like if they're starting with credit card and that's the foray for the customer experience, then you kind of build off of that. But those are some of the big names there. ANZ Bank in Australia has done some pretty amazing things moving from traditional to digital. I was just there 2 weeks ago. So we're seeing this as a worldwide phenomenon.
Sure. You made an interesting point of how traditional banks are moving in this direction. What are the challenges most of these traditional banks actually face, and what are the impediments for them to move really fast? If you look at, say, for example, the names that you quoted, an Apple Pay or a PayPal or Stripe, they didn't have legacy systems, and that's one of the things that always pushes the traditional ecosystem down. So how was the way in which they transformed?
Yeah, I would put it into three categories. The legacy systems for one. But I think technology is an easier problem to solve than some of the others. Culture was a huge one. And you would see, especially in banking in the U.S., there's a certain demographic, people with, decades of experience, have been at the bank for a long time. And there's there's a fear that because we're dealing with money and because we're dealing with the responsibility to our customers, we need to be really slow and really careful. And I can appreciate that, but sometimes that has swung to the opposite extreme. The third one I would say is regulatory. I think, regardless of what part of the world you're in, regulation plays a big part in the traditional banking environment. And the reality is the regulation has not moved as fast as the customer expectation or the technology innovation that's been rolling out lately, right? So a lot of times, I recently worked with, in financial services in my role, it's across banking, it's across insurance, fintechs, and, wealth as well. I recently worked with a customer in the US where there was regulation that was written 8 or 9 years ago that prevented them from doing business with a cloud provider like Adobe. And it's almost to the extent where the regulation says, now if you are partnering with Adobe, then Adobe takes on the full risk and responsibility that you do to your customers. And we're like, wow, that's interesting. That was not the intention when it was written originally, right? And so these things have not been updated over time. So those, I think, are the three big ones.
Now, when you specifically talked about culture, and what do you think has enabled, say, for example, the names that you quoted, whether it is JP Morgan or Wells Fargo, what are the change in the culture that has enabled them to really come up the CX curve?
Yeah, you look at Charlie Scharf at Wells Fargo. He came in as a change agent, right? Jamie has always been that way over at JP Morgan. He speaks on behalf of the industry quite a bit. Top-down, tech-forward-thinking, innovative leaders are causing the change that we need to see. It's the middle layer that we see that's a little bit frozen, I would say, and slower to change. But Jamie's been very, very vocal. Recently, he says, look, we're going to be an AI-first bank. I mean, for one of the largest, most profitable banking organizations in the U.S. to be able to make such a bold statement on such a nascent technology is pretty big. So I think that's one. The second one, I would say, is on the other side. It's customer expectation, right? Because, I always talk about organizations grow because of opportunity, and they move fast because of threats. If we cannot service the needs of the customer in the expectation that they have now, we're not going to exist anymore. And I think these two kind of dynamics have forced these great companies that I mentioned to really move quickly and say, hey, we have to be on the leading edge, especially as this new chapter is being written on how we engage with our customers.
It's interesting you talked about customer expectation. And in India, I think we can proudly say that the financial services and the Fintech made instant money transfer possible, which today, for example, a retail industry is trying to do it in 10 minutes. I think the entire financial services industry taught a lot of speed-related stuff to the rest of the industry. But definitely we have to learn a lot about removing friction. And that's my next question to you. We all talk about frictionless journeys, and sometimes in the financial services industry, like what you said, I remember the first day when I was at the bank after working in telecom and retail for a long period of time. The first thing I was told is, hey, you're in a fiduciary responsibility position. You're treating other people's money, and trust is the most important thing. And the trust, for it to be developed, there is a physical channel which is there. There's a physical human touch which is required. And invariably, a digital transformation is met with a lot of resistance on the physical side. Where do you see that? How did you see that happening in the developed world for us to learn lessons from them?
Yeah. Ravi, I love what you said about trust. I think we have great physical branches with big logos and fancy drive-in car parts, but there's not a lot of people in the branches. And I think having those physical locations speak to this tangible, like there's a presence, and it creates that trust. I think people go in and they use it the first time they're opening an account. Usually it's to meet with your financial advisor if you're doing some kind of planning. Sometimes, even perhaps taking out a loan, right? You have a life experience, and now you're buying a new house or something, or baby's born. Those times we see them at that injunction. I think it still needs to be there, right? So the experience at the branch once you get there has become more digital in nature. So if you go in now to a branch in the U.S., you're not necessarily met by the first relationship manager. What you're done, you'll fill out a little questionnaire online, or even on your mobile as you walk in, and it will leverage the digital experience to augment who the next person you should talk to at the bank would be, because the reality is time is money. People want to be in and out. They want to have their needs met quickly. So I think it's a very interesting thing you say that. Now, with the millennial generation, I don't know that trust is defined the same way. I would argue that in my children's age, they don't necessarily think that they need to see a building to know that this is an institution that is trusted, right? I don't think they've ever seen the Apple building, but they use Apple Pay like Apple is paying for it, right? They use it freely. And so I often find that definition of trust really is tied back to, that kind of era that you grew up in, and the experiences are completely different for the millennials today.
I'll quote real research done in India. We have asked a lot of people, like, what is the first thing that you look for when you open a bank account? And they immediately say the branch was nearby. Fantastic. When did you last visit the branch? And the answer is like, oh, let me think.
Yes.
And most of them tend to feel that the physical branch is where their money is kept, and that gives you a lot of trust. And I also like what you said about millennials, because when we ask them, what do you say a definition of trust, they immediately say that our definition of trust is, you know so much about me, you know what all I do. So when you have a conversation with me, are you using everything of what you already know about me to have that conversation? And this leads to the next question for you, which is, CX is all about personalization. And today the consumer journeys are not necessarily linear. Somebody will search something online, will call up the relationship manager, then they might call up a call center. And there are multiple ways in which they engage. For example, with HDFC Bank, there are 15 channels which they can engage with. How do you actually bring the digital CX to the physical reality of the world?
Yeah, a wonderful question. And I'm going to ask you a couple of questions as well, because you guys have done an amazing job. For anybody that doesn't know, the leading innovative work on the digital front that you have done is absolutely amazing. So we'll come back to that in a second. To your question, I think, and this is where Adobe really plays in the marketplace. We talk about the customer experience, but the customer experience only goes so far till the point where you need to really understand what the customer's next interaction or need is going to be, right? So you talk about the Adobe suite of products. We do content, we do all the analytics, but there's this one piece called personalization. It's taking the data and the digital journeys that the customer has taken even before they got to you, and then deciding, hey, where is this person in their stage of life? What is their demographic? What is their age? What is their pay range? And what kind of products and services will resonate the most with this customer? Now, if we did this 10 years ago, some people may have raised their hand and said, that seems a little bit bold, right? And even to the point where you're violating some privacy. But that's not the experience today. You think about the world of Facebook, Instagram, and all of these digital experiences, TikTok, where even commerce is happening through all of these channels. The expectation is, you know what I need before I know, and that is how trust is now defined. The easier the experience, the more I can go to one single source and say, this is what I needed to complete. Oh, and by the way, I'll use JP Morgan as an example. I happen to bank with them. They will send me a quick notification that says, you have lazy money sitting in your account. Why don't you invest it? Why don't you take a couple of points of a return, even on a very safe money market? And I wouldn't have thought about that otherwise. So they're looking out for me in my best interest. And to me, that builds incredible trust, right? And that doesn't mean I had to physically go in there. It's a complete digital exchange.
Sure. So when you have these kind of personalization, the next question that comes to is like, how do you actually scale it for the 80 million customers, like, for example, HDFC Bank?
Yeah. This is where I think the real crux of the conversation starts to come in. The reason Adobe is making the investments that we are doing in personalization, and by the way, we're going to talk about AI in just a minute or two, because that is going to take us to a whole new level. Let's start with content for just a second. Adobe talks about the content supply chain. So when we define content, some people automatically think it's a picture or it's a video. It's not. It's anything that is going to be consumed by the end user, right? So it can be a PDF document, it can be a research document. But what's going to happen is you're going to have, in order to really get personalized to the hundreds of millions of people that you want to touch, you're going to have so many variations of this, right? At any given time, it's going to be 3 documents, 2 images, and 1 very, very powerful video that's going to get your customer engaged to say, I'm ready for that next experience with you. That is where Adobe is leaning in to help. The digital explosion, being able to manage this. I remember I was speaking to a partner in the US, and we talked about personalization. And they said, 5, 7, 10 audiences, we feel like we've personalized. I said, wow, imagine 1,000 unique iterations because you have that much variation, right? So really, we live in a world of hyper-personalization, and expectation is that we will continue that way. So that's where Adobe really helps to scale, is you let the system do the work. It's dynamic, right? You have the individual come to the site, they come, they log in, you have the entire experience of what they've done with you or even with other vendors, right? Because we do federation. And then it says, okay, this is probably what you will need next, and how often you're visiting, other parts of the site. So it's a big piece. Now, before I go forward, I would love to hear your perspective. You've done so much of this.
Before I answer, I think I want 3 specific things from you.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, it's all about real-time data.
Real-time data.
Second, using that real-time data and the analytics engine that you have to understand what next the customer needs. Then having the ability to create content at scale. If I look back, the first 2 was always there.
Yeah.
In multiple formats. And maybe 2 years back, we didn't know how to really create content at scale. And maybe Gen AI is the one which actually came in and helped all of us think that, oh, content at scale for the kind of vision that we all were thinking 10 years also back is now possible. So where is it that content at scale, what you guys are doing and how Gen AI is coming there to help?
Yeah. It's a great question, and it's three very specific points. So personalization requires data. We know that. You don't have to use Adobe's CDP to make that happen. You can be a Snowflake customer, you can be, whatever data source you have, right? But the idea is you have some repository of clean data that's accessible. So yes, we know who you are, we can track what you're doing, we can predict what's next. The analytics of that is also just as important. Being able to look back and say, how effective was my offer, was my campaign, was the last 6 months of transactions with my customers. You need to be able to measure that and make sense of it. Adobe is really good at that, right? Between our analytics platform as well as customer journeys. But this third one, I think, is the inflection point that is really exciting for us. It's content and content variations. If you think about how Adobe is organized, we have the enterprise organization. You might hear the term DX, and then we have the creative side of the house, right? You might hear digital media. On the creative side, the amount of time that people are taking to do simple iterations of an existing image or an existing video while staying on brand has just been unbelievable. Hours and hours and hours are spent managing at the pixel level, the changes that they want. That is just perfect. Now, we are excited because we believe Gen AI will augment, will help, not replace, it will help. And this is really important, right? So if you think about the common task that a creative has to do to say, I want this entire campaign to be very quickly resized to go into a social post. At the same time, I also want it to be ready for email and even SMS. That iteration can now be completely handed off to the machine. The creativity, the ideas, the message that you're trying to portray still comes from the human that had to put that together. So I think that's really interesting. The second thing I want to talk about, Ravi, for a second is commercial safety. I don't know if you recently saw Sora, which was launched by OpenAI, does great image generation, right? Google Gemini, like all of the, Midjourney, there's so many LLMs out there that can do the work of creating an image and even resizing it and changing it. And you can, be a prompt engineer and say, add this kind of background and that kind of experience. But what's happening is customers, banks like yourselves, government agencies, artists, these are people that put their work out there and they're building intellectual property, and that needs to be preserved and protected. So you think about commercial safety. How do you know that the AI engine is not going to take something that has been created, by the Rolling Stones or some other organization and is taking their content and putting it out there and making it available? And now a user in your bank, without realizing it, says, hey, this is a great image. Let me go ahead and publish this out there. And before you know it, you're in trouble. You now have copyright infringement. You now have a legal battle potentially ensuing. With Sora's announcement last week, I think Disney has made some noise. Several large organizations, the sporting organizations, are saying, wait a minute, that's our content. And this is not, just available for free repurpose, right? So the industry is at a big inflection point, but when it comes to enterprises and customers like, the ones that you service, you think about, wow, there's rich intellectual property that needs to be protected, and AI needs to be done in a safe way. So what we do, we train on your own model. We train on your brand guidelines. And when you create something, you know that what's created is either being used from within you, or if you guys prefer to use Adobe stock, which is already licensed, you can use some of our material. But when it's published, you know that you're protected. Adobe will indemnify and protect you guys. This is a really big thing when we talk about, the commercial model and how we scale, because content is going to explode. If you think about how many times the machine can go ahead and generate iterations, and how you tag it, how you manage it, and how you protect that.
It's a good thing that you said about the content at scale and how it is going to be there. For many people in the audience, I find it difficult for them to experience content at scale because they finally look at their screen. And unless they actually open the screens and start comparing, they will not know the difference.
That's right.
So one of the things that we at the bank always wants to do is to tell everybody, if you open any of the retail apps, for example, an Amazon or a Flipkart or something, the screen is very different for each and every one of us. And based on what is the past record, you will see the screen and it will tell us you products based on what you bought. When it comes to banking, it is almost similar, except for maybe the value of your balance changes. So we at HDFC Bank is now making sure that next year we will come and showcase it. It's already available live today. That if you open the HDFC Bank and look at your next person's HDFC Bank app, it will be different. Because that's what we are also aiming, saying if we have all the data and we have everything available, and obviously it is all about content at scale. We know the data, we know what needs to be given to the customer. Now let's put it in a way in which they will actually enjoy seeing it, whatever we are trying to sell. And my last question to you, we are all looking at reimagining customer experience, and the success of customer experience is measured by what?
That's a great question. Every bank, every insurance company that I work with, every of the wealth organizations, they all have their own KPIs. Usually in wealth, it's assets under management. How much more are we growing this, right? In banks, it's customer loyalty, number of services that you're selling. To me, it comes back to what we said earlier. It's trust. I mean, that is like the currency of being able to create a connection with an individual and they not having to worry about it because they know that they're in good hands with the experience. So it's I don't know if you're asking for specific KPIs and how they're measured, but in every organization, it is a little bit different. And Ravi, it's interesting. You have a unique role. You manage a P&L as well but in a lot of organizations that I work with, our CMOs don't even have that responsibility. So sometimes they're measured by impressions, they're measured by how many visits. But let's turn that over to you for a second. How do you measure it?
No, I think the best way to measure, as you said, is increase in trust. And the increase in trust is all defined by increase in business numbers over a period of time. So we were very clear in HDFC Bank when we went and started this era of digitizing the entire workflow for sales and service. Transactions is always digital in India. 95% of our transactions were digital. Primarily, we're looking at the sales interactions and the service interactions of the customers. And we said the best way to measure is what is the contribution digital will do directly in terms of sales and service. So once we put that kind of a number in place saying that you need to increase your contribution, and today HDFC Bank in many of the products in retail, we have zero human touch sales and service happening, and we have reached a certain number where we are extremely comfortable saying all the investments we are doing in technology, both in the back end as well as in the customer experience in the front end, we are able to really measure it and link it because there is no human involved in the sale of a personal loan, in the sale of a credit card. The customer has been campaigned, the customer has seen our advertisement in either a social media or for that matter inside the mobile banking or the net banking app. Customer clicks, reads about the product, applies, takes the product. And that's where I think we were able to really push the lever in terms of getting people to see what we can actually contribute to the business.
Excellent.
And that's the reason the P&L came in. And now the same thing is being seen on the services side, saying that how many more services we can enable the customers to do digitally and how do we actually nudge them. And that's where content at scale comes in, for example. How do we actually help them know that this is available digitally and this is so simple for you to do, and can you go ahead and do it? And yes, it has been a long journey, and thanks to you people and all the people who we partnered with in terms of our ability to get there. And what's your final thought on the entire Gen AI and how it is going to impact customer experience?
Yeah, it's a good one. By the way, once again, what you have done at the bank is nothing short of amazing. You're leveraging the entire Adobe ecosystem to be able to generate these personal experiences. And like you said, they want to be able to come to one place. One of the measurements, before I answer the question about Gen AI, is number of digital journeys. I heard you guys are now up to 30-ish?
all the retail acquisition products are all there. Now services, we have moved to almost 35 journeys are digitally.
That's incredible. That's incredible. Looking at how many, physical steps can be migrated over to digital journeys, mapped, and then being able to say, hey, we've reduced the amount of touch required is also a great measurement. Look, on the Gen AI stuff, first of all, there's going to be a lot of noise. People that are thinking and planning, I would say the first thing is be agile, be ready to change. What we thought we knew 6 months ago is different today, right? You think about the agentic framework. Adobe has announced 11 agents. We are an active participant in the agentic framework, A-to-A conversations, the MCP, being able to have an open standard. Like this thing is not truly been fully defined yet. There was a moment where we thought the large language model, the LLM, is going to be a differentiator. So we had Firefly. We're very proud of it. But since then, we now allow you to plug in other models that you want to bring in. So it's not going to be the model that differentiates. It's how do you bring that entire thing together to create that wonderful experience for your customer. And we have an ecosystem of applications that do that. We also have a data center here in India, so this is a fully cloud-enabled experience. So I would say plan 12 months in advance and be ready to change that plan 6 months in. Because it is changing quickly. But my final thought would be this. Look, Adobe's been around for a long time. We are an enterprise player. We're trusted by so many customers. And we want to come along the journey with you. We will not be one of those to profess that we have figured it all out, right? There's plenty of, you can listen to Sam Altman, profess all those kind of things. But we are a fast follower. We're adjusting to the pulse of what the market is asking for at a global scale. And then, we're providing those things. So you're going to see continued incredible innovation. But like I said, be agile.
Thank you, Jose. Thank you for your time, and thank you for succinctly articulating all about ability to get real-time data, ability to get analytics, ability to put together everything, having a clear success metric, and above all, what I really carry forward is the culture that we all need to ensure that is there in the organization, both at top-down and bottom-up, for us to ensure that every customer experience is redefined and reimagined. And thanks for all the things that you people are doing. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen.
Wonderful.
Give it up for Jose.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's give it up for Ravi Santhanam and Jose Thomas. May we urge the both of you to please step forward, allow us an opportunity to capture you in one frame. Hashtag GFF moment right there. We're at the day 2 of the 6th edition of the Global Fintech Fest 2025. And right now we just heard from Ravi Santhanam and Jose Thomas. Thank you so much to both our speakers for joining us